The blue card on Eleanor Whitcomb's door was tied with butcher string. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the rain leaking through the roof of the stairwell. Not the sour smell of dye water rising from the shop below. Not the way her left boot had begun to split where the leather met the sole. The string. Someone had taken the time to loop it neatly around the knob of room 4, as if eviction became more civilized when it was attached with care. The card itself was no larger than a calling card. Rent due by sunrise. No name, no apology, no threat. It did not need any of those things. That small can carry a whole building inside it, when the woman reading it has $18.40 in her purse and nowhere else to put her body. Eleanor stood in the hallway of Braddock's lodging rooms, her wet gloves folded against her stomach, and read the card 3 times. Then she touched the door handle. For most of her life, door handles had opened into places where something was required of her. Supper, linens, a sick child, a husband's sharp mood, a guest who needed coffee before he decided whether her husband's land price was fair. This handle opened into a room that required nothing, because it had already decided she owned nothing inside it, except what could fit in 2 crates. She went in anyway. The room was narrow enough that the bed and washstand seemed to be arguing over the same air. A strip of wallpaper hung loose beside the window. The rain had darkened the sill, and a slow bead of water gathered there, swelled, then dropped onto the floor with patient precision. Her first crate held papers, the separation agreement, 2 letters from a Pittsburgh attorney, a folded copy of the deed to the house on Mercer Street, with her husband's name written in every useful place, and hers appearing only in the margins of a life she had kept functioning. The second crate held what no legal paper had known how to value, her mother's tin of buttons, a cracked photograph of her son Caleb at 9 years old with 1 front tooth missing, a bundle of linen towels she had hemmed herself, and a set of joiner's tools wrapped in oilcloth, a marking gauge, a narrow chisel, a boxwood rule, with the handle darkened by the oil of her hand. She lifted the plane out and held it under the weak light. For 43 years of marriage, that tool had followed her from shelf to drawer to trunk to the back of a cupboard, where useful things went when a household decided a woman's usefulness had a narrower shape. Her left hand still bore the pale groove where her wedding ring had rested. She had not thrown the ring. She had not struck the table. She had placed it beside Josiah Whitcomb's coffee cup the morning after he told her there would be a settlement, a transfer, an arrangement, and he hoped she would be reasonable. Men use quiet words when they have already done the loud part in secret. The loud part had been the house. Josiah had moved the title 3 weeks before he admitted there was another woman. Celia Marr had a clean face, a new black hat, and the brother connected to men who wanted old canal land for a rail spur. Josiah had called it complicated. Eleanor had heard the simpler truth beneath it. He was not leaving her for love. He was leaving with inventory. The house had been first, then the bank account, then the furniture pieces he claimed had market value, then the name Whitcomb itself, which he wore as if she had only borrowed it. Room 4, with the blue card tied to the door and the rain finding the floorboards, Eleanor placed the plane back into the crate and sat on the edge of the bed. She did not pray for rescue. Rescue, she had learned, was usually another person arriving with terms. Instead, she thought of her father's shop in Allegheny City, where the windows faced a brick wall and the room smelled of cherry dust, lamp oil, and hide glue. Her father had been a cabinet maker, not a gentleman, but exactness had been his form of kindness. He taught her that wood was never silent. It told you where it wanted to split. It told you whether a joint had been forced. It told you when a surface only looked ruined because nobody patient had cleaned down to the true grain. A good joint, he used to say, pressing two boards together with his thumbs, does its work where nobody claps for it. At 19, Eleanor had believed her life would be built around that sentence. She kept a notebook of designs then, a linen press with narrow drawers, a cradle with curved runners, a writing desk with a secret compartment so cleanly fit that the eye would pass over it and never know it was there. On the last page, in a hand more confident than she had yet earned, she had written, "Pharaoh and daughter cabinet repair, established," and then a blank line for the year. She married Josiah before she filled it in. At first, she still worked when she could. A neighbor's rocker, a cracked drawer, a chair whose rungs had loosened from winter dryness. Then Caleb was born, and the good light by the kitchen window became the place for mending shirts and cutting bread. Josiah's business grew, and the parlor had to look successful, even when the accounts did not. Her tools moved from the kitchen to the back pantry, from the pantry to the cellar shelf, from the cellar shelf into a crate. No one forbade her. That would have left a clean mark. Instead, life leaned on her one small task at a time until her own shape was hidden under the weight of everybody else's ease. She had been very good at disappearing. That was the sentence that came to her after midnight while water struck the floor beside the window. She had not failed at being seen. She had succeeded too completely at making life smooth for others. Smoothness, once achieved, is mistaken for nature. By sunrise, the blue card still hung on the outside of the door. Eleanor opened it, untied the string, and put the card in her purse. Then she carried both crates downstairs. Mr. The rooms and the dye shop below them did not meet her eyes when she passed. She was grateful for that. Pity is a kind of tax collected in silence. Outside, the town of Alder Creek was gray with October rain. The old canal basin lay east beyond the last blacksmith shed, a place people still used for directions, though the canal itself had been dead for 20 years. Eleanor had seen the basin on a county map pinned in the public reading room. A thin blue line of water, a lock marked with a number, a service path that bent toward the creek and ended in a smudge of brown ink. Beside it, in handwriting someone had added later, were the words, Lock 9, closed 1876. A shut place, a forgotten place, a place no sensible woman would walk toward with 2 crates and $18. Eleanor had been sensible for 68 years. Sensible had left her standing in the rain with a rent card in her purse. So she hired a boy with a handcart for 15 cents, loaded the crates, and walked east. The road narrowed after the glassworks. The houses thinned. Smoke from town fell behind her, and the smell of wet leaves took over. The canal appeared first as a ditch of black water, then as a stone-lined cut running through weeds and saplings, its banks collapsing in places where roots had pried at the old masonry. Lock 9 sat below a stand of sycamores. Were gone. The ironwork remained, rusted dark and twisted in places. But the stone chamber still held its shape, 2 long walls, dropping into rainwater the color of cold tea. On the far side stood the Lockhouse. It was smaller than Eleanor expected, and more stubborn than it had any right to be. 2 rooms, a low porch, a roof patched in 3 different metals, 1 window boarded, the chimney leaning slightly, like an old man refusing a cane. The boy with the handcart looked from Eleanor to the house and waited for her to admit she had made a mistake. She paid him. After he left, the silence around Lock 9 grew larger. The silence of emptiness. It was the silence of a thing that had been working long before anyone thought to name it useless. The front door stuck twice before it opened. Inside, the air smelled of damp ash, mouse dust, and old wood. A small stove sat against the inner wall. A ladder led to a sleeping loft no taller than a kneeling prayer. Against the back wall, half covered with burlap and a collapsed chair frame, stood a workbench. Not a table, a bench. Eleanor knew the difference before she touched it. It was built of cherry, thick-planked and scarred, with dog holes along the front edge and an iron vise whose screw had rusted but not surrendered. The surface was blackened by years of oil, candle smoke, tool marks, and hands. One leg had cracked near the foot, another had been shimmed with a wedge of pine that had shrunk away from the load. The bench sagged toward the center, not dramatically, but enough that a straight edge would tell the truth. She set her purse down. Then she set her palm on the bench. Under the grime, under the damp, under all the years of being left to weather and vermin, the cherry was still there. Cherry had a warmth even when cold. It held light deep inside itself and gave it back slowly. Eleanor stood with her hand on that ruined bench and understood something she did not yet want to call hope. The bench was not asking her to admire it. It was asking whether she could still read. "You and me," she said, not softly, not sentimentally, just as a statement of inventory. The first week at Lock 9 was not a beginning, it was triage. The chimney needed clearing before fire. The seam above the loft took rain and a steady thread. The porch step had rotted from beneath and looked firmer than it was, which made it more dangerous than if it had openly collapsed. The pump outside gave no water until she took it apart and found the leather cup split and stiff with age. She spent $3.70 at Havel's Hardware on nails, stove cement, wire, a small brush for the flue, and a square of tarred canvas. That left her with $14.55. Then $11.15 after flour, salt pork, candles, and lamp oil. Numbers became weather. They governed what could be done and when. She did not resent them. Her limit is kinder than a false comfort. For food, she traded work. She reset 2 hinges on Mrs. Pell's pantry door for a sack of potatoes and 3 onions. She mended a cracked milking stool for the Rusk farm and took payment in eggs. She repaired the drawer of a church collection box and accepted a heel of ham from the deacon's wife, who tried to apologize for the size of it until Eleanor said, "A small honest payment is larger than a large dishonest promise." Word moved through Alder Creek before Eleanor did. An old woman at Lock 9, Whitcomb's wife, though some said not wife anymore, good with tools. Not asking. The last part mattered. Less afraid of need when it arrives carrying a chisel. On the 9th day, Abram Vale came down the service path with a toolbox in one hand and the lantern in the other, though the morning was bright enough that he did not need it. He was 70, or near it, narrow through the shoulders, with a white beard trimmed close and the forward-leaning walk of a man who had spent decades listening to machines before they broke. "I tended this lock from 61 until they shut the canal," he said. Eleanor was on the porch, prying up the rotten step. "I have damaged nothing that was not already arguing with gravity," she said. Abram looked at the step, the chimney, the patched canvas over the roof seam, and the smoke lifting from the repaired stove. "No," he said, "but you're trusting that porch joist too much." He did not offer to fix it. He showed her where to test the wood with the tip of the awl. He showed her how rot travels under paint. He showed her how to sister a soundboard alongside a failed one, so the strength transferred without pretending the old damage had never happened. Then he handed her the saw. The first cut went crooked. Eleanor looked at it, set the board aside, and cut again. Abram said nothing. Silence was his way of not insulting her with rescue. By the end of the afternoon, the porch could hold weight honestly, not beautifully, honestly. As he packed his tools, Abram touched the cherry workbench. Lockman filed gear teeth on this, he said. Sharpened tools, counted wages. Once, a man set his baby here while his wife helped pull a mule out of the cut. He rubbed his thumb over a dark crescent burned into the surface. Leave the marks, he said. A thing that has survived should not have to pretend it was never used. That sentence stayed with her. She began the bench 2 days later. First, the vise. Broke the screw, cleaned the threads with wire, and worked it loose by fractions until the iron turned again with a low, reluctant groan. Then the surface. Not sanding first, never sanding first. Sanding lies when dirt is still pretending to be history. She used the wooden brush from her crate, small circles, light pressure, patient enough to learn what was grime and what was witness. Beneath the black film, cherry grain emerged in long reddish lines, scarred but steady. The cracked leg took 3 attempts. The first replacement wedge was too soft. The second fit poorly. The third held. She kept the first 2 pieces on the floor beside her while she worked. Mistakes, if kept visible, become teachers. Hidden ones become habits. When the bench stood level again, Eleanor placed both hands flat on it and leaned her weight down. It did not shift. That was the first time since leaving Mercer Street that something held because she had made it hold. Nora Keene, who ran the public dining room near the train depot, saw the bench because Abram brought her to see it. Nora was a broad woman with flour on one sleeve and the expression of someone who had run out of patience years earlier and found life much easier afterward. I have a sideboard with a warped door, Nora said. Railmen slam it like it owes them money. I can look at it, Eleanor said. I did not ask if you could look. The sideboard took 4 days. Eleanor cleaned the swollen rail, reset the hinge, trimmed the catch, and matched the stain with lampblack, vinegar, and patience. Nora paid her $5 and set a small card on the counter beside the sideboard. Repaired by E. Eleanor Whitcomb, Lock 9. Eleanor read the card for a long time. She had not used faro in 43 years. Seeing it there did not feel like going backward. It felt like finding a board that had been stored under a stack of weight and discovering it was still straight. $5 bought better oil, a new rasp, and 2 panes of salvaged glass. It also bought something no shop sold. Proof. Work could leave her hands and return as money without passing through Josiah's permission. That would have been enough for a smaller story. But Lock 9 had not finished speaking. The packet under the floor came up on a cold evening in November. Eleanor had noticed the loose board for days. It rose a hair higher than the rest of the floor near the stove, just enough that her boot caught it when she turned. She expected a mouse nest or a warped joist. Instead, beneath the plank, packed between 2 beams, was an oilcloth bundle stiff with age. She carried it to the cherry bench and unfolded it slowly. Inside were 4 things: an iron key, a canal ledger with half the pages eaten at the edges, a hand-drawn parcel map, and a folded copy of a county order dated 1848. The ink had faded in places, but the lines on the map were clean. Lock chamber, towpath, keeper's garden, spring path, house lot. A boundary had been drawn around the lockhouse, the pump, the narrow strip to the spring, and a section of the service road. Beside the boundary, in brown ink, were the words Lockkeeper Reserve, not part of main canal asset, maintenance use in perpetuity. Eleanor read the words once, read them again with the lamp lowered closer. Maintenance use in perpetuity. A phrase that had slept under the floor while men in offices forgot the floor existed. Abram came the next morning. He took off his cap before touching the ledger. "My father spoke of this," he said. "The company set aside keeper lots for certain locks. Said a working lock needed someone on the ground, not a manager in a city. Does it still matter if the canal is closed?" Abram looked through the doorway toward the dead water in the lock. "Depends who wants it not to matter." By noon, Eleanor understood. Records office, a clerk with pomaded hair and the habit of speaking too loudly to women, opened 2 ledgers, then a third. His voice changed on the 4th. "There is an old reserve notation," he said. "I know." He looked at her then, properly for the first time. "There has been a petition filed concerning Lock 9. "By whom?" The clerk paused. He was young enough to think rules were walls and old enough to know some walls had doors. "I am not permitted to say." Eleanor did not argue. She had spent enough of life managing men's discomfort to recognize when pressure would close a mouth instead of opening it. Abram found the name by evening, Josiah Whitcomb. The petition had been filed 8 days before Eleanor discovered the packet under the floor. Josiah had known about the reserve, or Celia's brother had, or one of the railroad men had paid for a search old enough and careful enough to find what everyone else had ignored. The rail spur did not need the whole canal. It needed the service road, the spring, and the firm ground beside Lock 9. Exactly where Eleanor was living. 2 days later, a man in a black coat came down the path with a legal notice sealed in cream paper. He held it away from the damp as if rain were the most threatening thing in the scene. He informed her that her occupancy was unauthorized. He informed her she had 11 days to vacate before further action. Eleanor listened until he finished. Then she said, "The county order of 1848 separates this house lot from the main canal property and reserves it for maintenance use." The man blinked. People sent to frighten poor women rarely arrive prepared for archived language. "I am only the messenger," he said. "That is fortunate," Eleanor said, "because the message is weak." Abram's wagon appeared at the top of the path then, wheels sliding in the mud, his old lock ledger on the seat beside him. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "I'll speak to the court," he told the man. "I tended this lock 15 years. The house was treated separate from the canal asset the whole time I knew it." The man left with clean boots ruined. That night, Eleanor sat at the cherry bench with the legal notice, the 1848 order, the map, and the old ledger arranged before her. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her less than it once might have. Fear is often loud when a person has options. When options narrow, fear becomes a tool. You pick it up, use what edge it has, and set it down before it cuts the wrong thing. Caleb arrived on the morning train 3 days after the notice. He was 39, broad-faced, careful with his hat, and carrying guilt in both shoulders. Eleanor saw it before he crossed the road from the depot. Mothers learn the weight of a child's silence the way carpenters learn the weight of wood. He had received the letter she finally sent. Not the first letter, where she claimed arrangements were adequate. The second one, where she wrote that arrangements had become a word other people used when they wanted her to be quiet. Caleb stood in the doorway of Lock 9 and looked at the stove, the patched roof, the repaired porch, the cherry bench, the sideboard drawer waiting on sawhorses, the parcel map weighted under a flat iron. "You said you were managing," he said. "I was," Eleanor said. "Become more exact about the word." He swallowed. "I knew Father was involved with canal land." The room did not change. The fire did not flare. The rain did not strike harder. Some sentences arrive without theater because they have been heavy long enough to no longer need an entrance. When? Before he left, Caleb said. A man in Pittsburgh mentioned his name, said Josiah Whitcomb could find dead parcels better than any lawyer in the county. I thought it was business. Then I thought it was not my place. Then I thought you would say so if you needed me. Eleanor looked at her son. He was not a boy. That made his mistake larger, not smaller. Also made repair possible, because grown men can be asked to carry what boys cannot. You were wrong 3 times, she said. Yes. Then we will begin with the true number. For the next 2 days, Caleb copied documents, indexed ledger entries, marked the parcel boundaries against the county map, and wrote to an attorney who owed him a favor from a freight dispute. He did not ask forgiveness every hour. Eleanor was grateful. Regret that demands constant tending becomes another chore for the injured person. Josiah came on a Thursday. Of course it was a Thursday. The mind keeps useless anchors when the important thing is too large to hold directly. When she heard the hired horse on the path, the blade moved along the wood in a thin whisper. A curl of cherry lifted, folded, and fell at her boot. She finished the stroke before looking up. Josiah dismounted near the deadlock gate. He wore a city coat and boots that did not know the path. He had aged since she last saw him, but not humbly. His face had the strained look of a man discovering that consequences have texture. He looked at the house, the smoke, the stacked firewood, the repaired porch, the sign she had burned into a cedar board beside the door. Locklight Repairs, E. Farrow Whitcomb. Eleanor, he said. Josiah? He waited. Perhaps for anger, perhaps for grief, perhaps for the old reflex that would invite him into warmth because he had arrived cold. She set the plane on the sawhorse. He looked at the drawer front. You did this? Not all at once. It was the only answer large enough and small enough. He nodded as if he understood, which irritated her more than if he had openly failed to. I did not authorize Celia's brother to send that notice. But you filed the petition? His mouth tightened. I filed an inquiry. That is different. A joint forced at the wrong angle is also different from a broken one, Eleanor said. The chair still throws the sitter. He looked away. For 43 years, she had watched Josiah use language as a cloth laid over hard edges. Now there was no table between them, and no guest to impress. The railroad chose another route, he said. The commission is gone. Celia is gone as well. I am not the place where your losses become important. That landed. Not because it was cruel, because it was measured. Josiah removed his gloves slowly. I can help at the hearing. I know the records. I know how the county reads old petitions. You used that knowledge against me when I still believed your silence meant nothing was hidden. He had no answer. At the Lockhouse, Caleb moved. Josiah heard it and looked toward the door. He is here? He is helping. With your permission? With his effort, Eleanor said. Permission is not the word for work freely offered. Josiah studied her then as if seeing the grain after years of staring only at varnish. I saw the sideboard at Nora Keene's, he said. I recognized your hand in it. The old Eleanor might have taken that as a gift. The woman standing beside Lock 9 knew better. Recognition delayed until it cost nothing was not payment. You recognized what remained after neglect, she said. That is not the same as having valued it. He flinched. Good, she thought, not as revenge. See, a true edge should cut. The hearing was held on the first Monday of December in a room above the county offices that smelled of coal smoke, wet wool, and paper. The railroad attorney spoke first. He called the canal abandoned. He called the reserve obsolete. He called Eleanor's presence irregular, sentimental, and legally inconvenient, though he used more expensive language for all three. Then Eleanor's attorney, a spare man named Mr. Pike, placed the 1848 order on the table. He placed the parcel map beside it, then Abram's lock ledger, then tax notations showing the keeper lot had been listed separately for 9 years after the canal company failed, then Caleb's copy of the service road survey. Eleanor sat with her hands folded and watched men learn the difference between empty and overlooked. The judge was older than Josiah, but younger than Abram. He had a habit of pressing his thumb against his lower lip when reading. He pressed it there for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Mrs. Whitcomb, what maintenance do you claim to perform at Lock 9? The railroad attorney looked almost pleased, as if the question had cornered her. Eleanor stood. She did not speak about deserving. Deserving was too soft for the room. She spoke about the cleared chimney, the repaired pump, the reinforced porch, the stabilized roof seam, the opened service path, the spring kept accessible, the lock wall cleared of saplings whose roots would split stone if left another season. She spoke as her father had taught her to work, point by point, no decoration where fit mattered. Abram testified after her. Then Nora Keene, who had no patience for rooms full of men performing importance, testified that Eleanor's repair work had already brought trade and practical use back to a place the town had written off. Josiah was called last. He could have clouded the matter. He could have shaded dates, could have made confusion from what he knew, because confusion had been one of his professional tools. Instead, he told the truth. Yes, he had searched the old records. Yes, he had found the reserve notation before Eleanor did. Yes, the petition was filed in expectation of a rail agreement. No, he had not informed Eleanor, though he knew she occupied the Lockhouse. The judge's face did not change. But the room did. A hidden joint had taken load. The decision came 2 weeks later. The lockkeeper reserve was recognized as separate from the main canal asset. Eleanor's maintenance of the house, spring path, service road, and lock wall satisfied the use named in the order. No corporate claim could absorb the parcel without a separate action and compensation. The language was dry. Eleanor read it at the cherry bench with Caleb standing by the stove, and Abram pretending to adjust the latch he had already adjusted twice. She did not weep. She put the paper flat on the bench, smoothed it once with her palm, and placed it in the top drawer. Then she went outside and changed the sign. Locklight Repairs became Locklight Restorations. By spring, the deadlock was still dead. Eleanor did not romanticize ruins. Water did not move through the chamber. Boats did not return. No miracle made the past useful by pretending it had not ended. But people came. A farmer brought a blanket chest with a split lid. A schoolmistress brought a desk whose drawers stuck every wet week. A widower brought a cradle and asked if it could be made strong enough for his daughter's first child. Nora brought 3 more pieces from the dining room and paid without apology. Abram brought nothing and came anyway, because old working places are less lonely when someone inside them knows the value of maintenance. Caleb came twice a month through winter, then every week after his freight office reduced staff. He learned to sharpen blades. He learned to read grain. His mother did not make him noble, it made him late. And late was better than absent. By the 3rd year, Locklight Restorations had repaired 47 chairs, 19 drawers, 11 tables, 6 clocks, 3 church pews, 2 washstands, and 1 carved walnut cradle whose owner cried when she saw it standing level again. Those numbers mattered to Eleanor, not because they made a legend, because they made rent unnecessary. The last time Josiah came, he did not ride down the service path. He stopped at the top, left a folded packet with Abram, and went back toward town before Eleanor had to decide whether to see him. Inside was the old notebook. Pharaoh and daughter cabinet repair. Established. The blank line still waited at the bottom of the page. Eleanor looked at it for a long time. Then she dipped a pen and filled in the year. Not the year she was 19. Not the year she married. Not the year Josiah left. The year she returned to the work. A good joint does its work where nobody claps for it. Her father had been right. But not complete. Sometimes the hidden joint holds a table. Sometimes it holds a house. Sometimes it holds a woman together long enough for her to discover she was never the scrap left over from someone else's plan. At dawn, light entered Lock 9 slowly. The dead water first, then the stone wall, then the cedar sign, then the repaired porch, then the cherry bench visible through the window. Eleanor stood inside with her apron tied and her hands resting on the work. The world had once named her temporary. The joinery held.